Get started whenever. Is this thing working? All right. Hi, everybody. My name's Nathan. I've been brought here thanks to Vicky to give a talk about sort of the pieces of the maker world that I deal with in my work and art. Can everyone understand me okay? Should I speak more slowly? Good. I apologize I don't speak any German. I'm terribly sorry about that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of some of the projects I've worked on and how I came to be here, and then touch on a little bit of sort of the maker movement in the world at large and its humanitarian and community building facets, and then we'll sort of open it up for questions and see what you guys are interested in diving deeper into. So I came into the maker movement a few years ago through my work at Burning Man. Is everyone familiar with the Burning Man Festival in the US? So it's a thing. It happens. I've been working for Burning Man in some capacity off and on since 2004 as a volunteer, and then as staff, building infrastructure and setting up a temporary city that for 1 week out of the year is the fourth largest city in the state of Nevada, and then the rest of the year doesn't exist. I took a year off of building infrastructure some years ago to build this thing. This was sort of my first time in a makerspace. Was we had about a 10,000 square meter makerspace, and kind of way out in the desert, with a huge metal shop and wood shop and auto shop and textile room and all these things. And we took over almost the entire structure to build this temple. There was, you can't quite see it here, but these are all like CNC panels. These are all welded steel dragons. Each one is unique. They all breathe fire. The lights in each of the petals have addressable LEDs that animate. And there's sound effects and so on. And the flame effects, the sound effects, and the light effects were all keyed to sort of interactive elements that we built that all ran through Raspberry Pis and were kind of designed to be interactive with the audience. Let's see if I can find a shot of the fire really quick just to show you guys. This is going to be awkward. Let's see. Yeah, you can see it a little bit at night. No, anyway. And then we burned it down. There we go. So, I poured a year of my heart and soul into this project, and then set it on fire. And I really fell in love with what the maker movement makes possible. And I never could have made this. I never could have brought together the community that we brought together for this. This had an impact on way more people than I anticipated. There was, I think, 4 weddings that took place at this temple in the week that it existed. And when we burned it, a friend of mine put his mother's ashes inside. This brought a lot of people together. And I made some of the closest friends that are still in my life today, and some people I've done business with and people that I would trust with my life. I know because we worked on this together. And so making as not just tinkering and hacking on things, but as a way of bringing people together became something that became very important to me. I fell in love with it, but I also became very aware of a lot of the challenges that the maker movement faces. I feel like maker spaces, hacker spaces all around the world are doing incredible things and is full of amazing people, and yet it seems like they're reinventing the wheel over and over again. It reminds me, I think you might appreciate this, the metaphor I often use is that maker spaces feel like personal computers circa 1988. If you wanted to, there was not really a shared universal protocol. Like you could go online if you were technically savvy enough and you knew who you wanted to talk to. You could get on with FreeBSD or NetZero or AOL or whatever, but there was no internet in the way that we understand it now. And by the same token, there's no MakerNet. There's no universal platform that makerspaces can just jump into and be a part of. And so I wanted to make more art. I wanted to create bigger and better things, but the friction involved in just getting that process to happen was so frustrating. I was like, there's got to be a system. There's got to be some system, I just don't know about it. And I looked and I looked and I couldn't find one. And so finally I said, well, fuck it, all right, I'll make one. Make the tools you want to use, right? And so for the last couple of years, I've been developing a platform called MakerNet, which is how I met Vicky. MakerNet is, this is one of those things, we can dive into this more if you guys are interested. I'll give you the brief overview, and then we can talk about it more if you want. MakerNet is basically a free open source platform to manage all of the day-to-day sort of logistical activities of a makerspace, but then leverage the data set generated from that use to create essentially an open accreditation ecosystem. So, right now there's a lot of, to put it another way, there's a lot of challenges that makerspaces face, and many of them are being effectively addressed already. But the three that I don't see having a well-defined solution are that if you go to a makerspace primarily to learn a new skill and then apply it somehow, right now you have no way of proving you have acquired that skill. You have no way of transferring that skill with you to another space. And you have no way of making any money with that skill short of starting your own business, which is, sets the bar too high for most people. So the platform essentially is an attempt to solve all three of those problems in a single stack. Everyone with me so far?
I don't think we have any of these problems. I think these are like making money is not on the agenda. I think most people here. Like skill transfer, I think sit with some guy and then you will acquire the skill if you ask nice enough.
That's not what I mean by skill transfer. And I understand that at hackerspaces like this, it's slightly different. Makerspaces that I deal with primarily are a little more hardware oriented. But so what I mean by proving that you've acquired a skill, I don't mean, okay, hey, look, you were there, watch me do the thing. Okay, I can prove that. But in a sense that, how can I prove to someone who, short of demonstrating it for them, how can I say, I am accredited to use this thing? So for example, for safety and for skill. I mean, so for example, say you have a CNC machine, big, expensive, often very difficult to use, and could hurt me or break the machine if I use it improperly. If I've never been to your space, you want me to take a class. You want me to prove that I can operate this effectively before you let me use it. If I've logged 1,000 hours on the exact same machine somewhere in another city or at a different space, how can I prove to you that I already know how to do that? How can I transfer that skill with me? How do I not just do this over and over again? That's a lot of what keeps people from moving freely between spaces. If I've invested 500 hours on this machine at this space, and I have to start at 0 over here, I'll keep going back to this space even if this one's more convenient, or if this one has another thing I need. And then I can't move freely. And then that connects to the how do you make money with this skill? Like, yeah, if you just know how to make, if you have a skill that you can just turn directly into a job, like programming, that's sort of a separate thing. But if we're talking about 3D modeling and fabrication, or prototyping, or like prototyping with Arduinos, if you're talking about injection molding, et cetera, all these things, welding, fabrication, all these skills. Short of doing it in front of someone and saying, look, I can do this thing, this is how well I've done it, how do you prove that? And how do you get connected with people who want you to do that and will give you money to do it? I don't want it to be LinkedIn, which is just sort of, all you have to do is claim you can do a thing and get some friends to say, yeah, sure. It doesn't mean anything. But if it's all pegged to objective data, if you're like, all right, I'm going to use this system to reserve these hours on this machine because I need to use that machine for whatever project,
But those hours then add to the bucket of all the hours that you've put on every one of those machines in your profile, and that profile faces possible employers or collaborators, people who want to mentor, etc. You see what I mean?
I see, yeah.
Okay.
But for us, that would be like privacy nightmare for us.
Right, and that's the privacy gets really interesting, and it's something that I take very seriously. You know, there's no one size fits all solution, and for the people who, especially in America, where it's very difficult to find work right now in large parts of the country, you know, and there's maker spaces that are offering training and the ability to sort of solve your own problems, but no one can afford to use them because no one can make any money off of it, and it's an expensive hobby. I'm trying to solve that problem right now. You know, how that integrates with the sort of the hackerspace community in a place like this is very different, and I hope to have it be something that is inclusive of all of these different kinds of spaces. But right now, I don't think the problems I'm trying to solve are necessarily the problems that you care about. I'm just sort of saying this is what I've been working on. So anyway, and that sort of led me to how to put it. You know, one of the amazing things about the maker movement is it's hard to imagine a problem that can't be solved. You know, people are creating everything you can imagine, and so at a certain point you have to come to the question of, if you can make anything, what do you make? Why do you make it, and for who? For me, part of the beauty of the maker movement has been the way that it offers the possibility of sort of, you know, like an end run is sort of I don't know if you're familiar with that term, I don't know if that translates, is to step around or circumvent, that's the word I'm looking for. A lot of the ways that capitalism has really taken away from us the agency and the dignity that comes from solving our own problems. You know, if you're dependent on some external company to decide that they want to sell you a thing in order for you to be able to solve a problem in your own life, then your ability to, you don't have any agency. They can just decide they no longer service that product, and suddenly you have no ability to solve this problem again. You know, the beauty of the maker movement is that you reclaim that dignity and that agency. But as you know, people realize that there's money to be made, and you know, Intel and Autodesk and all these companies have gotten really big into the maker movement, it's, you know, capitalism kind of starts pulling it back in. And you know, yeah, it's great to be able to make toys for your kids and 3D print crap to sell to people. But at a certain point, are there bigger problems that we could be addressing that we don't realize? And so that's kind of how I met Geraldine and Vicky, was at a humanitarian maker fair in Kathmandu, where everyone was, you know, solving sort of, I don't know, I don't want to say real problems because that sort of implies that there's fake problems that other people are doing, but I don't want to get into the value judgment of that. But it's fine. No, it doesn't really matter. So one of the big areas that I've been sort of pushing this work has been this idea that if you can actually network all of these makerspaces in the world together and make their capacity known and available in real time, then you can start connecting it with disaster relief coordinators. You know, anyone who has any sort of sense of what's going on with climate change and, you know, all of the massive amount of refugees that are already being created because of climate change, both directly from sea level rise and droughts and all of the conflicts that come from that, and everything else that's going on in the world. You know, the number of storms that are going to, you know, just destroy cities, that number's only going to go up. You know, the maker movement, if it's ready and if it's willing, can be an alternative to the ponderously slow, horribly inefficient, and deeply problematic humanitarian aid sector. It can be a way for people to solve their own problems, much with, you know, agility and dignity for the people who are actually dealing with this on the ground. that's, to that end, I've been working with groups like Field Ready, Communitaire, and Humanitarian Makers. So that's kind of the general overview of what I've been working on and how I came to be here. Does anyone have any questions that I can answer, or anything you want to dive into deeper?
Why did you start to build that? What drives you to start doing it? Maybe you get it, maybe you said it, and I didn't get it.
Oh, so I started with, I was talking about this project here. It was my first time in a makerspace, was building this temple, and I saw makerspaces as these centers of community, where everyone in the town kind of came in and tinkered with things and learned stuff and supported each other. I saw it as a place where, especially in America, the education system is completely broken. The cost of education relative to what you get out of it is obscenely out of balance. And being able to just go in and learn something directly, either for free or very cheap, it's almost the only way that you can do it in America right now. I know that varies from country to country, and it's different in a lot of the EU, where your universities are still much more affordable. But the chance to learn something in a hands-on way that you don't have to pay tens of thousands of dollars for is really meaningful to me. So all of this was basically meant I fell in love with makers, the whole maker movement, through doing this, but I became really acutely aware of the challenges and the ways that it's still kind of wandering in the dark, and all these people trying to connect with each other and trying to solve the same problems over and over again. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yes, Vicky.
I would be interested to hear more examples from the humanitarian makers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I personally know a few,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm always surprised when somebody else answers this question.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I know a little bit more than anyone else.
Sure. Let's see. Actually, I should tell them about the temple in London, actually.
Let me do that really quick.
So, there we go. So one other really good example that I want to tell you. So there's a tradition of doing these amazing structures. Who was it? Who was the CNC guy? Okay, you'll appreciate this. That's all CNC and laser cut plywood. That entire thing. This guy David Best does some of the most incredible work, and he started building these structures as a way to bring people together to honor those that we had lost. People that started off with, losing a son to suicide, and then it expanded to be, anyone that had been lost. The father you no longer speak to, or the woman you divorced, or the child who ran away, whatever it is, and everyone comes and kind of leaves their memories here, and at the end of the week, everyone burns it together. He got tired of doing this for years and years and years at a festival, and he wanted to try to apply this kind of out in the world. So he went to a town in Northern Ireland. I don't know how much you guys know about sort of the IRA and what happened in Ireland, about like the Protestants and Catholics, and a lot of death and a lot of long bitterness. In the town of Londonderry, there's not a single person in that town who hasn't lost someone on both sides. And so he went there, and he brought a new design for a temple. And he had his own crew to build it, but he brought people in from both sides. He brought people who lived there in,
who had lost parents and loved ones, and have them all come together and build this thing together. And left the temple up for a few weeks, let everybody come in. It's all unfinished wood, so you can write directly on it, or all this texture, and you can sort of tuck notes in and things like that. And then they all burned it together, and it provided healing and reconciliation, and it changed that town forever. I think it's easy to get into your narrow world with making and kind of think about the technical problems to solve and how cool it will be if this thing works. But there's something about the artistry of doing something like this and really bringing people together around it that's incredibly inspiring, and it's a lot of what brought me into it. There's also some groups that are doing things on a little more sort of less artistic but more direct action level. Trying to think of it's an Israeli group whose name I'm forgetting at the moment, that does kind of hardware hacking and make-a-thons entirely for people with disabilities, like people who have lost limbs, people who have like neurological disorders where they can't use parts of their body. And often if that's the case, you're dependent on incredibly expensive medical procedures or sort of closed source objects that people have, like medical supply places have built that are, this is the one thing that you can get that does this, and you just have to accept that this is how it is, and if it doesn't work for you, then too bad, because they're the only one that makes it. And applying maker skills to actually hack these things into being something that the specific person who has this disability actually wants and uses and can make and can work with themselves. There's incredible stuff being done. I have a friend right now who's 3D printing prosthetic hands and feet for people in Nepal who've lost them right now, and yeah, all that kind of stuff is or what keeps me excited about this. I think that part of the reason why I kind of talk to people about it is that overall I find that all the makers that I meet around the world are wonderful people who have brilliant minds, and if you put a problem in front of them, they'll find some exciting way to solve it. But the problems that people see are the ones that are around them. And if the problem that you see is that you don't have a cool lighting for your space, then you'll work on that. You work on cool lighting for your space. If you knew that there was someone who needed a hand and that you could 3D print one and you could connect to them, you'd probably come up with some awesome thing to do that. But the makers aren't necessarily connected with the problems that they want to be solving or that they could be solving. And so it's part of why I'm trying to bring everyone together on this.
Could you go into a little bit more into how you organize these super big projects? Because in making, if I think of making, I'm not thinking of this scale. This is like, if Hasi would decide to build this 10 years maybe, I don't know. But I mean, for you making it, I think it's very different, right? You do big stuff and you do it also very quickly. You have to do it in a time frame which is manageable, right? So
Yeah, I mean, so the one that I made was about 9 months start to finish. We burned it on the 9-month mark, so it was the art baby. And so yeah, and I understand that making means different things for different people, and for a lot of people, especially in hackerspaces, it seems a very individual or very small group activity that's that yields either something kind of on a screen or that you can hold in your hands. And I kind of came to this world through large-scale installation art, where you have teams of 3 to 25 people maybe. Like I had my team for the temple I did was maybe a dozen, maybe 10, 12 people, with maybe another 12 volunteers to kind of help do the lifting towards like the last month of things. We just needed extra hands. But it was very much a maker project. We were hacking together the electronics and the interactive elements and figuring out how to do that on the fly. We were figuring out how to get the Arduino to talk to the DMX controllers for the LEDs and writing the Python script to run that. while we were building the structure itself. And it was, how to put it, it was also a maker project in the sense that a lot of us were learning how to do these things for the first time. Like I taught myself how to weld to make those dragons. I still have scars from those. Those things drew blood every day. I think I was seriously considering renaming the entire thing the Temple of Tetanus at one point. So yeah, anyway, to answer your question, I think there's something about the maker process, to the extent that there is one, where you say, okay, what do we want to do? How do we do it? I don't know, let's figure it out. And just sort of throw yourself into finding a way to make it happen. That can be incorporated as a sub-process within a larger construction project. If you run it like, okay, project manage a construction project, but this part here and that part there are essentially maker processes within it, that's totally doable. You just have to be able to sort of build the system that contains that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay. And then the people who worked on this, they were like full-time, or they learn how to do it during the process, but I mean, how
So,
did it work out?
so the core group of us that I put together, I think it started with me and 2 other people, and then we brought in the rest of the team. That was kind of like the core team. That was, we were all full-time. We were full-time from when we came on to the end. For most of that team, it was like 6 months, start to finish. I had some more time in the beginning and end. But, we found some, we raised money to build it, and we paid them a little bit of money so we could all just do this full-time. We got an art grant from Burning Man. We had some support from some people in Taiwan, and we just ran it like a construction project.
This would be my next question. How do you finance such large projects?
Uh,
For us, it would be totally impossible to finance like this.
Well, we don't know which spins the pull.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe, yeah.
Boils down to that.
Yeah, I guess.
Right, exactly. I mean, how do you know it would be impossible? Have you tried? There's a lot of ways to do this, and there's a lot of, and for my temple, we raised about $250,000 US. That was, the bulk of that was from a single donor who had, sort of a real estate empire in Taiwan who really wanted to bring like Taiwanese culture to the West. And so there was a big part of it from there, but also the logistics for sort of his camp and sort of his side of things ate up an enormous amount of those resources. We could have done the whole thing for half as much money and still had most of what you saw. We could have done it. We could have done it a lot of ways for much cheaper. I think we could have had most of what we built for under 100,000, which is still a good chunk of money. But we raised about 25,000 just on Kickstarter, and we got about 25,000 as a grant from Burning Man. If we had scaled it down and just said, okay, well, we have this 50,000, we still could have had something that was, more than half the size, just less detail. So there's a lot of ways to do it. Burning Man art is its own world, certainly, but there's 140 some odd Burning Man events around the world now. Nowhere in Spain is the big one in the EU, and people do some pretty incredible art out there. Burning Man right now is actually sort of really interesting because they're this huge global phenomena, and they're very invested in the maker movement because they understand that if the maker movement, and especially the kind of the big industrial art maker spaces die off or can't remain viable, all of the good art that makes Burning Man what it is will die. Like the maker movement and the industrial art movement that creates this stuff are one and the same in America. I don't know if that holds true out here, but that's kind of the context that I'm coming from. As far as your question.
Sorry, I didn't get that. Is that what do you mean by industrial art?
So industrial art is, how to put it, so applying industrial skills, like welding, plasma cutting, CNC, and so on, to large-scale art.
Right.
So, like the temple that I made, you could just, how to put it, you know, if you're talking about, say, a spectrum of things, we have like the sort of hackerspace stuff over here, which is mostly small-scale electronic stuff, into makerspace stuff, which is like medium-scale hardware and fabricated objects. On the other end is industrial art, which tends to be very large-scale, so often a little bit more crude in the details, because you're doing much larger things, but not necessarily. And using, you know, whether it's milling machines or, you know, CNC plasma cutters and things like that to do large-scale art. That's a lot of what we found out at Burning Man.
Did you distribute the workload to different makerspaces?
But it's that we had one really big one. It was about 10,000 square meters.
I was thinking about 20 people in one space, and the whole temple has to be stored anywhere.
Well, we had to build it in pieces because we couldn't even fit the whole thing. We couldn't even fit half of it inside. So we built it in segments. Here, I'll see if I can. I'll show you again. Yeah, so we built it in segments and then had to. Sorry, I'm used to a Mac. So you can maybe see it on this one. So the whole thing was, here's you can see the CNC wave patterns on all of the wall panels. Each of these is a welded steel frame with curved plywood around it. And that was also one of our sort of maker projects, was figuring out how to get plywood that was, what is 3/4 inch is going to be like 8 millimeter?
I think 1 inch is 0.5 centimeters.
Okay, so yeah, it was probably maybe like 15 millimeter plywood to form curves around steel. So that was a fun project. We had no idea how to do that. Getting all of the piping inside these to run propane lines that went in through the structure and down through the central column into the control unit, and then out to the propane tanks here to feed those. But so every one of these segments, there's this roof section is 2 pieces that come together. All these panels were separate. The floor panels came apart into 16 pieces. And all of this had to be built in pieces and kind of guess fit together, but we couldn't assemble it ahead of time. We had to just have it all in pieces and go, all right, well, we hope we measured this right, and then send it out on trucks and get it to the site and start putting it together for its one and only time.
How long did it take to put it together then?
We had, I believe, 2.5 weeks, in which, you know, we also had dust storms and lightning and, you know. Yeah, the dragons are still there, somewhere. I don't know what happened to them. Yeah, yeah. No, we pulled those off before the end. But yeah, I think let's see, so for scale, the top here is about 16 meters, and it's about 18 meters across.
When you said you were all working in one makerspace,
Mm-hmm.
I'm imagining like come there with your 20 people,
Mm-hmm.
you use all the machines, you constantly make noise, so you basically take over the whole thing, right, for a while, which is kind of, I don't know, maybe because other people want to do stuff, you know, how does this play out? I mean, for you, makerspace is more like infrastructure, right? You want to use the machines. I mean, for me, that's a little bit a different understanding that I'm used to it, and
Mhm.
it's like now I understand why you have the challenge, like your
Yeah.
problems, where they come from.
Right.
You want to go in, you want to do your stuff, you want to do it quickly, and you want to have the machines.
Well, so that's not the only way I use this. Like, doing it for Burning Man was its own very particular thing because we had a deadline. We had if it wasn't ready on that day, everything was wasted. That's not the only way that I want to make things. I had other projects that I wanted to make that didn't have to be for this, but that's how I came into it. But yeah, we did take over about 3/4 of this 10,000 square meter space. And there was other people there. There's other people working on other projects, many of which also went to Burning Man. We had the official support of the board of directors of that makerspace. They really wanted us to do this piece, and they offered us all of this space to do it. If we hadn't had their support and their sort of blessing to take over their entire space, we couldn't have done it. We wouldn't have succeeded. And in part, it was sort of wanting to give them something back because I saw them struggling to make their makerspace viable. That led to this whole project. I see what you're getting at. I don't necessarily just come into a makerspace and be like, all right, we take. But I did in this one case. Yeah.
So you did assemble a team because they were experts in some kind of.
Oh no, I did.
In this case,
Yeah. So it was a mix. I had an architectural designer and an architectural engineer who knew what they were doing. I needed this to be structurally sound. It was going to have thousands of people on it. I needed to make sure it was going to be safe. I had master carpenters and very experienced welders and people who really knew what they were doing as far as the core competencies of make something with wood and steel. It was mostly the maker skills that we were figuring out. It was how to get these patterns out of a CNC machine, how to figure out the electronics for all of the IoT pieces that put together to make the interactive effects. It was how to curve the wood and how to build these dragons and get them to breathe fire. That was the stuff that there's not really a trade skill for. That was the stuff that we all figured out on our own together.
Did you have designers to sketch the whole thing before building everything, or did you design it while building?
I was the project lead, so the initial design was mine, and then I brought in the architectural designer who had done sort of large-scale industrial art before to help with a lot of the details. And we kind of started with a pretty good idea of what we wanted to do. Like I said, it was 9 months for me start to finish, and the first 5 were planning and designing to get everything as close to being, this is exactly what it is and what our budget is and so on as we could before we actually started building it. It was maybe 3 months of build. But no, we didn't hire out designers. It was mostly me and a couple people on my team. That was also how I started learning CAD design work. It was things like SketchUp and Fusion, just to start figuring out how to actually build this thing virtually because we couldn't pre-assemble it, so I had to know what it was going to look like. But that was half the fun.
Do something like that again?
I don't know. That one nearly killed me. I don't know if I'm going to do another one. Maybe if I finish this MakerNet project and get that off the ground, and then have some time and money to play with, I might do another one. But I feel like this one might have been enough for me. I burned through parts of myself I didn't know existed just to make this thing, and I wasn't really sure I was going to make it sometimes.
Can you go into a little bit more detail about MakerNet? So how does it look from the software side? How big is it? Is it already, like all the projects? Give me a quick overview.
Okay, it's been, how put it? It's something that I've been designing and working on with a very small team that we've been trying to bootstrap for a couple years. We actually just, this week, getting the final paperwork in place for our first like investment check from Google, actually. So this coming year, 2018, will be the first time that we can actually sit down and work on it full time, instead of working on it for a little bit and then going to do some other job to pay the bills and be able to eat. So we have a very basic, like early alpha code base. It's in a like Heroku and PostgreSQL and Ruby on Rails stack right now. That's maybe not what we would do for a final project, but something that's pretty quick to develop in. Huh?
Like Twitter. You
Yeah,
put
it's
it out on Ruby and then you implement it.
yeah, exactly. Right. So rapid prototyping, we'll probably rewrite it or refactor it in something else later. But and we've got some bits of open source code that address certain pieces of it that we're kind of pulling together and then trying to fold into something bigger. Basically, the heart of it is, if you have a makerspace and you have tools, you have machines that, ideally people are coming to your makerspace because they want time on your machines. They're like, oh, good, well, you have a workstation and 3D printers, you have this laser cutter, you have this CNC machine, you have this welding station, this soldering station, et cetera. Ideally, you have more people who want to use them than can use them all at one time. Your average makerspace has about 100 people who come to it or as members, give or take. And you probably don't have room for all 100 people all at once every day. So you need to figure out, well, is the tool that I, as a maker, as a member of your space, is the tool that I want to use available? Is it down for repairs? Is it broken? Can I know that before I show up? And so MakerNet at its heart just solves those basic problems, which, again, I was sort of amazed that no one had this because it seemed like such an obvious thing. For context, the makerspace I built the temple at, the system, if you wanted to use the laser cutter, was find Bill. And if Bill was sober, he could tell you maybe where the clipboard was. And if you found the clipboard, it could tell you who was signed up to use the laser cutter next, if it was working. This was the system. And this is not an uncommon system. So MakerNet at its heart is, what are all your tools? What are all your classes? Which classes allow you to use which tools? Or which classes are sort of tagged with being, maybe advanced skills in a certain tool category? When are the tools available? How many people can use them at once? And just put all of this scheduling in place. Basically make every tool searchable through space and time. So for example, if I want to say, okay, show me in the Berlin area laser cutters that have at least a 45-watt laser. And then every space that has one will pop up on a little map overlay. And I can say, great, show me which ones are available today. Okay, cool, this one, all right. Block out these hours on that machine, done. And you show up, tool's yours, do whatever you want on it, leave. And the fact that you have logged, another 4 hours on a laser cutter and you've done this project and done these things, aggregates to your profile, and you can keep that private or share it with people if you want to continue to find work doing laser cut, designs for people. Then the fact that you have, X plus 4 hours carries over. That's kind of the heart of it. The idea is to expand from that into things like pulling in micro-accreditations. Like if you take an online course through Udemy or MIT Online or something like that, it's like, here, how to program Arduinos or robotics and things like that. There's not, something that's smaller than a university degree program, but something that has an accreditation to it. You pull those in. You have API queries to all of those databases. Professional certifications. If, say, you have a certification from the International Welders Association, and you are certified in structural welding, that's a maker skill. That pulls in and that adds to your profile. All the classes you've taken, all the classes you've taught, people that, master makers in whatever skill that have mentored you. It means a lot more, I think, to spend 10 hours learning with someone who's been doing it for 20 years than it does to spend 100 hours just fucking around with it on your own. And so weighting those things, but having them all kind of be part of one profile. The idea is essentially to be able to speak meaningfully in an online profile about what you're actually capable of doing as a maker. And so that makers can find each other and say, I need to find someone who can show me how to do this thing. You know, show me makers in Siegen who have, you know, more than 500 hours of experience on this thing, or who have done projects with these tags, or whatever. You know, I need a collaborator. I want to hire someone. That's kind of the idea. You know, I think one of the applications that I see for this is, you know, you think about something like Lyft or Uber, which is not a great model in a lot of ways, but I'm not trying to recreate that. But essentially it's just a database of, you know, what kind of car do you have and where is it and is it available? It's just services. And then you just match it to people who are looking for those things. If you have a profile of people's maker skills and they want it to be public facing and they choose to let it be that, then there are people all over the world who can try to like either find them directly to hire them or negotiate a contract, or can just push a job into the system through a distributed manufacturer and say, all right, I need someone who meets these criteria, or any number of X number of people who can do this job. Here's like 1,000 units that need to get 3D printed somewhere in this geographic region. Just match it to people who meet those criteria. I don't even have to talk to them. You use something like Ethereum for a smart contract system, so it holds the payment in escrow. People can just show up to their makerspace and say, what do you got for me? Log in on the board. I'm like, okay, do this many things. Sure, spend some hours, do that. Put it into the queue, money appears in your account. You actually get paid to be a maker. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, before you said Ethereum, I said that this already sounds very centralized. You know, you have this big database and it always comes to it, and you know, so that's also a problem, I think, something to keep in your head, because you know, if you just have one database where everything is, and I mean, there has to be trust.
Yeah, of course.
And you, as the operator of this system, now is the person who creates the trust. And yeah, that's kind of, I mean, that's not a protocol. You talked about doing a that's a service, and that's centralizing everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't have to be centralized, and I think there's ways to. Vicky and I are talking about this, and I have some other people that I'm bringing in on this. You know, I think there's a lot of potential for something like blockchain to make this secure and distributed, and not have it be a thing that I'm owning. Like I'm doing this as a free open source project. I'm not doing this because I want to be the Facebook of makers. You know, I want this to be something that is secure and that respects people's privacy, and where there's no one centralized repository of all of this data, but that people still have ownership over what of their data goes where, and be able to see that. You know, I'm doing this because this is something that I want to use. I don't want to use something that's taking my data and sending it somewhere I don't know what's going out. You know.
Are there any questions?
I would like to come back to something you said earlier, that makerspaces could be a space to provide education to people who are not able to leave quite otherwise. Do you see, when I agree that this is a great thing, to provide free education for people who wasn't. And similar with the humanitarian work, stuff like this. But do you see the danger that the existence of such a kind of network might be an excuse for government to reduce its own involvement into these kinds of providing education and providing humanitarian help? So the government could say, okay, we don't need to provide that because it's there in the sense of makerspaces. They
Interesting. I don't think that. How do I put it? I don't know that the maker movement will ever be able to scale enough to really obviate the kind of, you know, international aid or education that's provided at a governmental level. You know, if the university system and the international aid system and so on are like the major arteries and veins, the maker movement can be the capillaries. And they're an important part that fills in a lot of the interstitial space and handles things that sort of fall through the cracks of the major sort of systems, but I don't think it'll ever replace it.
I'm more worried about, let's say, a person who is dependent on government support gets pushed towards, the government pushes this person into makerspaces to learn stuff. Not sure how to put it, but I think there is some sort of danger. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for hackerspaces, makerspaces being able to offer education, but only to the point where nobody else relies on this being able to provide that.
I think I see what you mean. And it's, again, it's very different here than in the States. In the States, if you rely on the government for survival, you're going to die.
Right.
If you rely on the government to cover your education, you won't have one. And it's getting worse all the time. There's over, I think, $1.4 trillion in student debt, just for that people owe for the privilege of going to an education system that doesn't really give them much, just in the U.S. And so, makerspaces as an alternative to that feels pretty good. I understand that there's no one-size-fits-all solution, and that even if this becomes a global network, how it interacts with each local government and culture is going to be very different. And it's part of why I wanted to talk to you guys. Like I'm not trying to say this is the thing that I'm doing. I'm trying to say, like, this is what I'm trying to do, and I would love input from people like you who are, coming at it from a very different perspective than I am. And I would love your help, in figuring out how to make this thing work. So I think it's, like I said, I think it has a lot of potential, and that only works if we all get involved. So, thank you so much for your time. If there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer them, but it seems like everyone's kind of asked what they wanted to ask. And I know you guys have a Christmas party coming up, so I don't want to keep you from that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. You have an amazing space, and thank you so much for opening it up to me. It's very nice to meet you all. I'll hang out for a little bit.